Once upon a time, there was a fish who lived his whole life in the great ocean. But because the water was so clear, and because it always slipped aside whenever his nose pressed against it, he never realized he was in the ocean at all. To him it seemed as if he was gliding through empty space, moving by his own cleverness. The water carried him, pushed gently against his tail so he could move forward, held him up so he wouldn't sink. But he never noticed. Then one day, the fish did something dangerous. He started thinking, wow, how remarkable I must be to be moving all by myself in the middle of nothing. But once he began to think about swimming, something went wrong. You know how it is. If you stop to think about breathing or about walking naturally, suddenly it feels awkward. The same happened to the fish. He became self-conscious. His strokes felt clumsy. And then he looked down. For the first time, he saw the endless black depths yawning beneath him, and terror struck him. What if I forget how to swim? What if I just drop and sink forever into that darkness? Panic filled him, and in his desperation, he thought of a plan. If I could just grab my own tail with my mouth, I could hold myself up. I wouldn't fall. So he curled himself tightly and snapped at his tail, but his spine wouldn't bend far enough. He missed. Not ready to give up, he tried again. And again. Round and round he spun, chasing his tail in frantic circles. The faster he chased, the more he felt the terrible pull of that abyss below him. The more afraid he became, the harder he spun. Time passed, and his world became nothing but dizzy circles, frustration, and fear. He was exhausted, disgusted, and yet too terrified to stop, for he was certain that if he paused for even a moment, he would fall into the darkness. His life had become a nightmare of meaningless effort, and still he kept spinning. Now the great ocean had been watching this little fish all along, with a mixture of amusement and pity. The ocean loved all its creatures. It gave them space to live, to dart and dance freely. It held them up without asking for thanks, always slipping away from their noses, so they could move easily, and always pushing gently at their tails, so they could glide through its vastness. But here was this poor fish, convinced he was swimming all by himself, and working himself into madness over nothing. So at last, the ocean spoke. "What are you doing, little one?" "I'm terrified," cried the fish. "I'm trying to catch my tail to keep myself from falling into that terrible abyss." The ocean calmly replied, "You've been trying that for quite a while, yet you haven't caught your tail, and you haven't fallen either. How do you explain that?" The fish blurted, still panting, "Because I'm swimming, of course. Don't bother me. Can't you see I'm busy saving myself?" The ocean laughing, "Oh? And how is it you have been able to swim through all of this nonsense, spinning round and round without falling once? I am the ocean in which you live, move, and are able to be a fish. I hold you up all the time. I have given you the height, the depth, the length, and the breadth of myself in which to swim. Yet instead of exploring, you have been wasting your life chasing your own tail." Asterisk. The fish stopped. For the first time since his panic began, he loosened his body and looked around. He wasn't falling. He wasn't sinking. Even though he had stopped moving, he was still floating, held by something invisible and vast. Then the truth dawned on him. It was the ocean that carried him all along. It always had. A deep calm filled him, He let his tail fall behind him where it belonged, and stretched his fins freely. Then, with a joyful flick, he darted forward. He swam higher, dove deeper, twirled left and right, exploring everything his eyes could see. And everywhere he went, the great ocean held him, carrying him easily, opening its endless expanse for him to enjoy. And for the first time, the little fish was truly happy. For now he knew he had never been alone, not for a single moment. You see, we are all very much like that little fish. For here we are, living in what you might call the great ocean of being. And most of us haven't the faintest idea that it's carrying us, supporting us, holding us up at every moment. We wake up in the morning, the heart is beating, the lungs are moving, the sun is shining, and the earth is spinning through space. And we take it all for granted, don't we? We think, well, of course I'm alive. Of course I'm here. I'm doing it. But just as the fish imagined he was swimming all by himself in empty space, so we imagine we are these separate little creatures pushing ourselves along in a world that has nothing to do with us, forgetting that we are, quite literally, floating in something far greater. It's rather funny, really. You don't notice water until you're drowning. You don't notice breathing until you try to hold your breath. Life is exactly like that. So obvious, so constant, that it becomes invisible. You don't make your heart beat. You don't grow your hair. You don't even know how you do something as simple as digest your breakfast. It just happens. But we think we are doing it all by our own power, just as the fish thought he was swimming through nothingness. And yet, every move we make is already being carried by the great something. Call it nature, call it the Tao, call it God if you like. We are, every moment, supported in the same way the fish is supported by the sea. But because it is so close, so intimate, we miss it. The fish didn't notice the water, and you don't notice that you are, in fact, being lived. But then, why do we get into trouble? The fish began to think about swimming, didn't it? And the moment you think about what you're doing automatically, it all goes wrong. It's like when you try too hard to fall asleep, and the very effort keeps you awake. We humans are very good at this sort of thing. We think, if I don't keep control, if I don't keep trying, everything will fall apart. So we tighten up, we worry, we try to hold ourselves together, while chasing our own tails, like that poor fish, convinced we might plunge into some abyss if we ever stop. And the faster we chase, the worse it feels. The more desperately we try to control life, the more it slips through our fingers, until finally, life becomes exactly what it was for the fish: dull, exhausting, and horribly monotonous. But the great joke here is, the fish never fell. Even in his ridiculous spinning, the ocean carried him all along. And when the ocean spoke, what did it say? You haven't caught your tail, you haven't fallen, and still you float. How do you suppose that's happening? This is the turning point. The moment you stop and notice, you are breathing without trying. Your heart is beating without your command. And even when you think you're in control, life is doing itself perfectly well without your help. The great secret is letting go. The more you struggle to keep yourself afloat, the more you sink. The moment you relax, you discover you're already being held, not by your own effort, but by something vast, invisible, and infinitely patient. The fish thought he was separate from the ocean, just as you think you are separate from life. But the truth is, You are not in this universe like a stranger who wandered in from somewhere else. You are the universe expressing itself as you. In the same way, the ocean expresses itself as a wave, or as a fish darting through its depths. The fish doesn't swim through the ocean. The ocean swims through the fish. Your heart doesn't beat because you make it beat. Life beats through you. We like to imagine we are these isolated little egos, struggling to survive in a great big world. But that's an illusion. You are as inseparable from the universe as a ripple is from the water. And once you see this, once you feel it, everything changes. There's no need to clutch at your own tail anymore. You stop trying to hold yourself up. You trust the ocean. Because whether you worry or not, you are already carried. Whether you resist or not, you are already moving, already alive, already held. You see, the fish was never in danger, not for a single moment. Even in his panic, even in his spinning, the ocean held him effortlessly. And that is the great secret you've been missing. All the while, you've been worrying, grasping, trying to keep yourself from falling. You were already safe. The fish, once he understood, stopped biting at his own tail and simply placed it behind him where it belonged. And so it is with you. When you stop clutching, when you stop chasing, when you stop pretending you are separate, you will discover what has always been true, that you are being carried here and now by something vast, boundless, and utterly trustworthy. The ocean of life has you. It always has. So, let go, swim, explore, wander, enjoy, just as the fish did when he finally stopped struggling. Trust, and you'll find the whole ocean has been waiting for you all along.
The Zen masters tell a story about a man who spent years trying to catch his shadow. Each time he lunged forward to grab it, the shadow would move just beyond his reach. Exhausted and frustrated, he finally sat down under a tree to rest, and to his amazement, the shadow settled perfectly still beside him. This curious little tale contains within it the very essence of our human predicament. We are like that shadow chaser, aren't we? Desperately trying to control the uncontrollable, manage the unmanageable, grasp the ungraspable. And in our frantic pursuit, the very thing we seek continues to elude us. I find it absolutely fascinating how we've convinced ourselves that we are these little isolated entities, separate from the great flow of nature, desperately trying to steer our lives, as if we were driving some sort of cosmic automobile. And yet, no matter how tightly we grip the wheel, life continues to surprise us, challenge us, and occasionally crash right into us. What I'd like to share with you today is something that might initially disturb you. It might even shake the very foundations upon which you've built your understanding of yourself. But beyond that initial discomfort lies a freedom so profound, so liberating, that once you've tasted it, you'll wonder how you ever lived without it. You see, the first and perhaps most fundamental mistake we make is believing that the universe has a purpose. We've been trained to think that everything must have a goal, an aim, a destination. But I want to suggest something radical. The universe isn't going anywhere at all. It isn't a journey from A to B. It's a dance. It's music. It's play. When children play, do they play to achieve something? Of course not. They play for the sheer joy of playing. The moment you introduce a serious purpose into play, it ceases to be play and becomes work. And yet we've somehow convinced ourselves that the cosmos is a very serious business indeed. I remember watching waves crash upon the shore in Sausalito. Each wave rises, crests, and falls back into the ocean. Does the wave fail when it crashes? Is it somehow not fulfilling its purpose? Or is the rising and falling precisely what waves do? They don't arrive anywhere. They simply wave. And so it is with the cosmos. Stars are born and die. Planets form and crumble. Life emerges and returns to dust. Not to achieve anything, but simply because this is what the universe does. It universes. It waves. But we, in our profound confusion, have decided that we must somehow control this cosmic dance. We must steer it, direct it, manage it, according to our limited understanding of how things ought to be. What spectacular hubris! Imagine a single cell in your body deciding that it must take control of your entire digestive system. How absurd that would be. And yet that is precisely what we attempt when we try to control life. The illusion of control is perhaps the most persistent and pernicious illusion we maintain. We believe we can control our thoughts, our emotions, our desires, our health, our futures, even the people around us. And in this desperate grasping for control, we create the very suffering we seek to avoid. Now, why are we so obsessed with control? The answer lies in what I call the illusion of separation. You see, somewhere along the way we developed this extraordinary idea that we are separate from everything else, that there is a me in here and a world out there. But is this really true? Take a moment to consider your breathing. Are you breathing, or are you being breathed? When you were born, did someone teach you how to breathe, how to digest your food, how to make your heart beat? Of course not. These processes happen of themselves, just as the stars shine of themselves and the planets orbit of themselves. You are not separate from the world. You are an expression of it. Just as a wave is not separate from the ocean, but is what the ocean is doing at a particular point in space and time, you are what the whole universe is doing, right here, right now, in the form of you. But the moment we forget this fundamental truth, the moment we believe we are isolated entities, we naturally develop fear. After all, if you're a tiny, fragile being in a vast and potentially hostile universe, of course you'd want to control it. Of course you'd want to build walls, create safe spaces, accumulate resources, and defend yourself against the other. And so we create an elaborate fantasy in which we are the controllers, the deciders, the managers of our lives. We say, I think, I feel, I want, I choose. But who exactly is this I? Where can it be found? Is it in your head? Your chest? Your belly? Try to locate it, and it vanishes like morning mist. The truth is, there is thinking, there is feeling, there is wanting, there is choosing, but there is no separate I doing these things. They happen of themselves, as naturally as clouds form and rain falls. But we cling desperately to the illusion of separation, because without it, who would we be? This brings us to the ego, that persistent sensation that there is a self at the center of your experience, calling the shots. I like to think of the ego as a character in an elaborate play that's forgotten it's in a play. It's rather like an actor who's played Hamlet for so long that he believes he actually is the Prince of Denmark, even after the curtain falls. Your ego is essentially a social convention, a useful fiction. It's what I sometimes call a social institution. Just as marriage is a social institution, it exists because we all agree it exists. So too is your ego. It's a story you tell yourself and others, a convenient reference point. I was born on such and such a date. I went to this school. I have these preferences. I believe these things. But here's the fascinating part. This ego, this supposed controller, is itself something that happens to you. You don't create your ego. Your ego arises naturally as part of your development in a social world. It's as spontaneous as your heartbeat, as automatic as your digestion. And yet this fictional character believes itself to be in charge. Isn't that marvelous? It's like a cork floating on a vast ocean, convinced that it's steering the currents. Or, as I sometimes put it, it's like a chicken taking credit for the egg. Look what I produced. says the chicken. But of course the chicken is equally a product of the egg. Now please don't misunderstand me. I'm not saying the ego is bad or that you should try to get rid of it. That would just be the ego playing another trick, wouldn't it? Look how spiritual I am. I've transcended my ego. But who exactly is making this claim? The ego, of course. No, the point isn't to destroy the ego, but to see it for what it is. A useful tool, a convenient fiction, but not the true controller. It's like the dashboard of your car. Very useful, indeed necessary, but not the thing that moves the car. The dashboard doesn't drive. It simply displays information. Similarly, your ego doesn't control, it simply narrates. This leads us to one of the most delicious paradoxes of our existence. The more desperately you try to control life, the less control you actually have. Isn't that fascinating? Consider the insomniac. The harder he tries to fall asleep, the more hopelessly awake he becomes. Or think about walking on a narrow beam. The more frantically you try to maintain your balance, the more likely you are to fall. Or consider the simple act of trying to relax. Try to relax is a contradiction in terms, isn't it? The very effort creates the tension you're trying to escape. The Zen masters understood this perfectly. They speak of Wu Wei, which is often translated as non-action or effortless action. But it doesn't mean doing nothing. It means allowing things to happen of themselves. It's the difference between trying to force a flower to bloom by pulling open its petals, which only destroys it, and providing the conditions, water, sunlight, good soil, in which the flower naturally opens according to its own timing. I remember a story about a Zen archery master. A student asked him, "How do I hit the target?" The master replied, "Stop trying to hit it." Perplexed, the student asked for clarification. The master explained, "When you aim, you create a separation between yourself and the target. When there is no separation, the arrow finds its own way." This is what the Taoists call Wu Wei, what Zen practitioners call no mind, and what Western mystics sometimes describe as letting go and letting God. It's not about abandoning all effort, but about finding the right kind of effort, the effort that flows with the grain of reality rather than against it. But our ego, that persistent fiction at the center of our experience, cannot comprehend this. It believes that without constant vigilance and control, everything would fall apart. It's like a child clutching a handful of sand. The tighter the grip, the more the sand slips through the fingers. Only with an open palm can you hold the sand. Now, let's explore a different way of understanding our relationship with the universe. What if, instead of being separate controllers trying to manipulate an external world, we are more like what I call wiggles in the eternal process? You see, the universe isn't made up of separate things that somehow need to be connected. It's a single, unified process that appears in countless forms. Just as the ocean appears as countless waves, or as a tree manifests as countless leaves, the universe manifests as you, as me, as stars and planets and mountains and mice. We are not separate things, but different ways that the universe is wiggling. Your existence is what the whole cosmos is doing right here, right now. You didn't come into this world. You came out of it in the same way an apple comes out of an apple tree. This perspective changes everything. If you are an expression of the universe rather than a separate entity within it, then you don't need to control it any more than your heart needs to control your circulation or your stomach needs to control your digestion. It's already you, and you are already it. Think of a whirlpool in a stream. The whirlpool has a distinct form, a clear boundary, even a kind of persistence through time. But is it separate from the stream? Of course not. It's what the stream is doing at that particular point. And so it is with you. You are what the universe is doing at this particular point in space and time. And just as a whirlpool doesn't control the stream, but is an expression of it, you don't control the universe, but are an expression of it. Your thoughts, your feelings, your decisions, these aren't things that an isolated you is doing to the world. They are what the world is doing as you. So you see, the question isn't whether you have control or not. The question is, who is this you that supposedly needs control? When you really look, when you really investigate, you find that there is no separate controller. There is only the eternal dance, and you are not the dancer, you are the dance itself. Given all of this, what would it mean to truly let go of control? I'm not talking about becoming passive or fatalistic. I'm talking about something far more subtle and profound. In Zen monasteries, students sometimes spend years trying to solve what are called koans, paradoxical riddles designed to break through the limitations of logical thinking. One famous koan asks, "What is your original face before your parents were born?" Another instructs, "Show me the sound of one hand clapping." These koans cannot be solved through intellectual effort or willpower. They can only be resolved by letting go of the need to solve them, by surrendering the controlling mind and allowing a different kind of understanding to emerge. And this is precisely what I'm inviting you to do with your life. Not to abandon all effort, but to surrender the illusion that you are the one making the effort. Not to give up on your desires, but to recognize that your desires are not yours. They are what the universe is desiring through you. When you let go in this way, something remarkable happens. Actions continue, decisions are made, life unfolds, but without the exhausting burden of believing you are personally responsible for controlling everything. It's rather like recognizing that you don't make your heart beat, it beats of itself. And yet, the beating continues perfectly well without your supervision. The Zen master Bankei called this state the unborn, the natural condition of mind, before we start dividing everything into self and other, control and chaos, success and failure. In this state, life flows of itself, like a river finding its way to the sea, not because it's trying to reach the sea, but because flowing is what water naturally does. Letting go means trusting this natural intelligence that grows your hair and beats your heart and digests your food, the same intelligence that maintains the orbits of planets and the cycles of stars. It means recognizing that life knows how to live itself just as breath knows how to breathe itself. You don't need to supervise it. You can relax and allow it to happen. Now, this doesn't mean becoming a passive spectator in your own life. Quite the contrary is less than #0. 5# is greater than. It means engaging fully, but without the illusion of separation and control. Think of a skilled swimmer in a powerful river. The foolish swimmer fights against the current, exhausting himself and making little progress. The wise swimmer works with the current, using its power to go where he needs to go. He doesn't try to control the river, he dances with it. Or consider a sailor. No sailor worth his salt tries to control the wind. That would be absurd. Instead, he adjusts his sails to work with the wind, harnessing its power rather than fighting against it. This is what I mean by swimming with the current. It's not passivity, it's a different kind of action. Action that flows from recognition of your true nature as an expression of the universe rather than a separate controller within it. I recall watching a cat stalking a bird. The cat doesn't think, now I must move my left paw, now I must lower my body, now I must wiggle my rear end. The cat simply becomes one with the action. There's no separation between the cat and the stalking. The cat doesn't stalk. The cat is the stalking. In the same way, when you understand your true nature, you don't live your life. You are your life living itself. You don't make decisions. Decisions happen through you. You don't control events. You participate in them as they unfold. This is what the Zen masters meant when they spoke of no mind, or what the Taoists called the action of non-action. It's not about doing nothing. It's about allowing action to happen of itself without the interference of an imagined controller. And here's the extraordinary thing. When you stop trying to control life, you discover that life has its own intelligence, its own wisdom, far greater than anything your limited ego could devise. You find yourself carried by a current of being that knows exactly where it's going, even if your thinking mind does not. Now, I understand that this might sound frightening. After all, we've been taught from an early age that security comes from control. If we don't maintain vigilant control over our lives, terrible things might happen. And so we cling desperately to the illusion of control, believing it keeps us safe. But I want to suggest something radical. True security comes not from increasing control, but from embracing uncertainty. I've called this the wisdom of insecurity, and it's one of the most liberating discoveries you can make. You see, the desire for certainty and control creates a rigid, brittle relationship with life. Like a tree that won't bend in the wind, we break under pressure. But when we embrace uncertainty, we become flexible, adaptable, resilient, like a reed that bends with the wind and so remains standing when the storm has passed. Consider how much of your suffering comes from resisting what is. You want things to be different than they are. You want people to behave differently. You want your own thoughts and feelings to be different. And in this wanting, in this resistance, you create your own anguish. But what if you could embrace uncertainty? What if, instead of needing to know exactly how things will turn out, you could trust the unfolding of life itself? What if, instead of trying to force reality into the shape of your expectations, you could adapt your expectations to the shape of reality? This is the wisdom of insecurity, not a passive resignation to chaos, but an active embrace of the flowing, changing nature of reality. It's the recognition that life is not a problem to be solved, but a mystery to be lived. The Buddha expressed this beautifully when he said, "The root of suffering is attachment. Attachment to fixed ideas, to specific outcomes, to the illusion of control. These are the sources of our anguish. But when we let go of attachment, when we embrace the inherent uncertainty of existence, we find a peace that no amount of control could ever provide." I'm reminded of a Zen story about a man riding a horse that was galloping very quickly. Another man, standing alongside the road, yelled, "Where are you going?" And the rider replied, "I don't know. Ask the horse." This is our predicament. We're riding a horse we cannot fully control, and the wisdom of insecurity invites us to enjoy the ride rather than exhaust ourselves trying to steer. Now, I want to be very clear about something. I'm not advocating complete abandonment of effort or intention. I'm suggesting a middle way between the extremes of rigid control and passive surrender. The Buddha called this the middle way, and it's a subtle path indeed. It's neither forcing your will upon the world nor withdrawing from participation. It's neither self-indulgence nor self-mortification. It's a dynamic balance, a dance between doing and being, between intention and acceptance. In this middle way, you set intentions, make plans, take actions, but without attachment to specific outcomes. You plant seeds and tend the soil, but you don't force the plants to grow by pulling on them. You aim the arrow at the target, but at the moment of release you let go of the need to control its flight. I think of it as playing jazz. A jazz musician doesn't simply abandon all structure and play random notes, nor does she rigidly follow a written score. Instead, she works within a framework of harmony and rhythm, but with freedom to improvise, to respond to the moment, to co-create with the other musicians and even with the audience. This is the true nature of skillful living, not rigid control, not passive surrender, but creative participation in the flow of life. You're neither the sole author of your life, nor a mere spectator, but a co-creator, a collaborator with the universe itself. The Taoist sage Chuang Tzu put it beautifully when he wrote about the skilled butcher who never needed to sharpen his knife. When asked how this was possible, the butcher explained that he didn't cut through the tough joints and bones, but found the spaces between them is less than #0. 5 is greater than he didn't force his way through the meat, but allowed his knife to find its own path of least resistance. This is the art of living beyond control, not forcing your way through life, but finding the natural paths, the spaces between, the flow that already exists. Not imposing your will upon reality, but aligning your actions with the grain of what is. And here's the most marvelous discovery. When you live this way, you find that things tend to work out better than if you had tried to control them. It's as if the universe has an intelligence far greater than your conscious mind, and when you stop interfering with it, this intelligence naturally moves toward harmony, toward balance, toward what the Taoists called the way. So we arrive at the final and perhaps most radical implication of all this. You are not a separate self struggling to control an alien universe. You are the universe, not metaphorically, not poetically, but literally. You are what the whole cosmos is doing right here, right now. Just as a wave is not separate from the ocean, but is the ocean waving, you are not separate from the universe, but are the universe humaning. You didn't come into this world. You grew out of it, in the same way an apple grows out of an apple tree. You are an expression of the cosmos itself. When you truly understand this, not as an intellectual concept, but as a lived reality, the idea of control becomes not just unnecessary, but absurd. Does your left hand need to control your right? Is less than #0. 5 hashes greater than. Does your heart need to control your lungs? Of course not. They are expressions of the same organism, and so it is with you and the universe. The mystics and sages throughout history have recognized this truth. They've called it by many names: Buddha nature, Christ consciousness, Atman Brahman, the Tao. But beyond all these concepts is a simple recognition: you are not separate from all that is. You are all that is, expressing itself as you. This recognition doesn't make you special or superior to others. Quite the contrary. It reveals that everyone and everything is equally an expression of the same ultimate reality. The beggar and the king, the saint and the sinner, the rose and the thorn, all are manifestations of the same cosmic process. And in this recognition comes a profound peace. The desperate struggle to control life dissolves into a dance of participation. The anxious effort to protect a separate self melts into the security of knowing that your true self is the universe itself. And how can the universe be threatened? I'm reminded of a beautiful metaphor from Hindu philosophy. They speak of Indra's net, an infinite net with a jewel at each intersection. Each jewel reflects all the other jewels and in turn is reflected in all the others. This is the nature of reality, not separate things connected by relationships, but a seamless whole in which each part contains and reflects the whole. When you see through the illusion of separation, when you recognize yourself as the jewel in which the entire cosmos is reflected, the need to control falls away of itself. In its place arises a profound trust in the intelligence of life itself, the same intelligence that keeps your heart beating and the planets orbiting and the galaxies spinning. And so I invite you to let go. Not in resignation or despair, but in recognition of who you truly are. Let go of the illusion of control and discover the freedom that was always yours. Let go of the separate self and discover your identity with all that is. Let go of the struggle against reality and discover the peace of aligning with what is. As we come to the close of our exploration, I'm reminded of something I often say: the only way to make sense out of change is to plunge into it, move with it, and join the dance. The truth that destroys your illusion of control is not a destructive truth, but a liberating one. It doesn't leave you powerless. It reveals a different kind of power, not the power of an isolated ego struggling against the universe, but the power of the universe itself flowing through you. You see, when you stop trying to control the river and instead become the river, you discover that the river knows exactly where it's going. When you stop trying to control life and instead become fully alive, you discover that life has its own intelligence far greater than your conscious mind could conceive. So I leave you with this invitation: for just one moment, let go completely. Stop trying to be in control. Stop trying to make sense of everything. Stop trying to be someone, and simply be. In that moment of complete surrender, you may glimpse what the Zen masters call your original face. The face you had before you were born, before you learned to see yourself as separate, before you took on the exhausting task of trying to control life. And in that glimpse you may discover what sages and mystics throughout the ages have recognized, that what you are seeking is what is seeking, that the controller you've been looking for is an illusion, and beyond that illusion lies not chaos but harmony, not helplessness but power, not isolation but connection with all that is. As the Zen saying goes, before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. The activities don't change, but the doer disappears. There is only the chopping, only the carrying, only this eternal now in which life lives itself through you as you. And isn't that extraordinary? Time. It slips through our fingers like water, doesn't it? And the tighter we try to grasp it, the faster it seems to flow away. Yet here's the curious paradox: when we're frantically trying to catch up with time, we're actually running away from our own lives. The more desperately we chase after tomorrow, the more completely we miss the miracle that's unfolding right here, right now. What if the secret to a life well lived isn't about doing more, having more, or being more, but about slowing down enough to actually experience what already is? You know, I've been watching people for years now, scurrying about like ants whose hill has been disturbed. Everyone rushing, hurrying, as if pursued by some invisible predator. And I wonder, what exactly are we all running toward? Or perhaps more interestingly, what are we running from? It's a peculiar thing, this modern obsession with speed. We've convinced ourselves that faster is inherently better. Faster cars, faster computers, faster food, faster lives. But here's the curious paradox. The faster we go, the less we seem to accomplish anything of genuine significance. Consider this: when you're rushing through your day, flitting from one task to another, one appointment to the next, are you actually getting anywhere? I don't mean in the physical sense, of course you are, but in the sense that really matters, in your experience of being alive, are you making any progress at all? What if, and this might sound rather absurd at first, what if this rushing is merely an illusion of progress? Like a hamster on its wheel, running frantically, expending tremendous energy, and yet remaining precisely where it began. You see, when we rush, we compress time. We squeeze the life out of each moment in our desperate attempt to get to the next one. And in doing so, we flatten our experience of living into something rather thin and unsatisfying. We trade depth for breadth, quality for quantity, being for doing. The ancient Taoist sages understood something that we seem to have forgotten. They spoke of wu-wei, often translated as non-action or effortless action. Not laziness, mind you, but a way of being in which things unfold naturally, without force or strain. Like a river that doesn't push its way to the ocean, but simply flows downhill, following the path of least resistance. What would happen, I wonder, if you were to experiment with slowing down? Not as some new spiritual practice to perfect, not as another item on your to-do list, but as a genuine inquiry into the nature of your own experience. What might you discover about yourself, about reality, if you allowed yourself to move at the pace of life itself, rather than at the pace dictated by your wristwatch? It's rather ironic, isn't it, that in our attempt to save time, we end up losing our lives. We are so concerned with efficiency, with squeezing more and more activities into our days, that we fail to notice something rather important slipping away, our very experience of being alive. When you're hurrying, and be honest with yourself now, are you actually here? Are you present in this extraordinary gift called the present moment? Or are you always somewhere else, in the future you're rushing toward, or in the past you're trying to outrun? You see, hurrying creates a peculiar form of blindness. When you rush through life, you literally cannot see what's right in front of you. The colors become less vivid, the sounds less distinct, the textures less palpable. Your attention becomes so narrowly focused on getting there that you miss the incredible richness of here. I remember walking through a garden once with a friend who was terribly busy, always rushing from one important meeting to another. As we walked, I stopped to observe a spider spinning its web between two branches, an absolutely marvelous feat of natural engineering. But my friend couldn't see it, not because his eyesight was poor, but because his mind was elsewhere, already at his next appointment. "Can we keep moving?" he asked, checking his watch. And I thought, how curious that in his hurry to live, he's missing life entirely. This habit of hurrying doesn't just rob us of beauty and wonder, though that would be theft enough. It actually steals our life away in a more fundamental sense. Because life, real life, can only be experienced now. Not in some imagined future, not in the remembered past, but in this moment. And when we're constantly rushing, we're never really in this moment. We're skimming along the surface of time rather than diving into its depths. And here's the most curious thing of all. This hurrying, this constant acceleration is based on a profound misunderstanding. We believe, somehow, that if we can just get through enough items on our to-do list, if we can just accomplish enough goals, if we can just get to some imagined destination, then we'll finally be able to rest, to enjoy life, to be at peace. But that moment never comes, does it? Because there's always something more to do, somewhere else to be, another goal to achieve. The finish line keeps moving farther away, the faster we run toward it. What if serenity isn't waiting for you at the end of your to-do list? What if it's available right now, in this very moment, if only you would slow down enough to notice it? We often speak of the mind as something that needs to be controlled, don't we? My mind is racing, we say. I need to get my thoughts under control. As if the mind were some wild horse that needs breaking, taming, disciplining. But I wonder, is that really the nature of mind? Or is it simply that we've never really understood what the mind is and how it works? You see, the mind, your mind, my mind, isn't really a separate thing at all. It's more like, well, imagine a whirlpool in a stream. The whirlpool appears to be a distinct entity, something you could point to and say, there it is. But of course, it's not separate from the water at all. It's just water in a particular pattern of motion. You can't extract the whirlpool from the stream. It is the stream just moving in a certain way. Your mind is rather like that. Not a thing, but a process. Not separate from the world, but the world experiencing itself in a particular way, through a particular nervous system, with a particular set of memories and patterns. So when your mind races, when thoughts cascade one after another in an endless torrent, perhaps it's not that something has gone wrong. Perhaps it's simply that the conditions, both internal and external, are conducive to that particular pattern of mental activity. Just as certain conditions in a stream will inevitably create a whirlpool. What happens, I wonder, when you stop fighting with your own mind, when you stop trying to force it into stillness, and instead simply observe its natural movements with curiosity rather than judgment? There's a delightful story about a Zen master who was asked how he maintained such perfect composure. "When I'm sitting," he replied, "I'm just sitting. When I'm eating, I'm just eating. When I'm walking, I'm just walking." "But that's what we all do," protested the questioner. "Oh no," said the master with a smile. "When you're sitting, you're already thinking about eating. When you're eating, you're already thinking about walking. When you're walking, you're already thinking about what you'll do next. You're never where you are." And that's our peculiar predicament, isn't it? We're never where we are. Our bodies might be here, but our minds are always somewhere else. Planning, worrying, remembering, fantasizing. What if, instead of trying to tame the mind like some wild beast, we simply learn to be with it as it is, to watch its movements with the same gentle attention we might give to clouds passing across the sky? Not identifying with every thought, not being dragged along by every emotion, but simply witnessing the ever-changing patterns of consciousness. Perhaps then we might discover that serenity isn't something to be achieved through mental discipline, but something that emerges naturally when we stop struggling against our own experience. When did you last notice your own breathing? I don't mean controlling it or changing it or doing any special breathing exercise. I mean simply noticing the breath as it flows in and out of your body. It's happening right now, isn't it? As you listen to these words, air is flowing into your lungs, oxygen is passing into your bloodstream, carbon dioxide is being exhaled. This most fundamental rhythm of life continues, whether you pay attention to it or not. And yet how rarely we notice it. This miracle that keeps us alive moment by moment passes largely beneath our awareness, like a subterranean river flowing beneath a busy city. There's something rather wonderful about the breath, you know. It's both voluntary and involuntary. You can control it if you wish. You can hold your breath or breathe more deeply or more rapidly. And yet, when you're not paying attention, it continues on its own, regulated by ancient parts of your brain that operate quite independently of your conscious will. In this way, the breath stands at the threshold between the conscious and unconscious aspects of your being. It's a doorway, if you like, between the self you think you are and the self you actually are. And there's something else curious about the breath. It's rhythmic. In and out, like the tides of the ocean, like the alternation of day and night, like the endless cycle of the seasons. When you pay attention to your breath, you're tuning in to a fundamental rhythm of nature itself. Modern life, with its linear sense of time and its constant acceleration, tends to pull us away from these natural rhythms. We override our circadian cycles with electric light. We ignore the seasons with climate-controlled environments. We rush through our days according to the mechanical ticking of clocks rather than the organic pulsing of our own bodies. But the breath remains a constant reminder of our connection to the rhythmic nature of reality. Try it now if you like. Just for a moment, bring your attention to the sensation of breathing. Feel the air moving in through your nostrils, filling your lungs, and then flowing out again. Don't try to control it or change it in any way. Just notice it. There. Did you feel it? That slight shift in awareness, that subtle movement toward presence, that's the beginning of serenity. You see, when you pay attention to your breath, even for a moment, something quite remarkable happens. You become present, not lost in thoughts about the past or future, not caught up in the endless narrative of the thinking mind, but simply here, now, experiencing this moment as it is. And that's really all serenity is, being fully present to your own experience, whatever it may be. Not reaching for something else, not pushing away what is, but simply being with reality as it unfolds, breath by breath, moment by moment. Have you ever noticed how peculiar time is? Not the time on your watch or your phone. That's just a convention, a useful fiction we've all agreed to live by. I mean your actual experience of time, the way it seems to expand and contract depending on what you're doing and how you're feeling. When you're engaged in something you love, something that absorbs your full attention, time seems to vanish altogether. Hours can pass in what feels like minutes. But when you're bored, or in pain, or anxiously waiting for something to happen, even a few minutes can stretch into what feels like an eternity. What does this tell us? Something rather profound, I think. It suggests that time, as we experience it, isn't really out there at all. It's not an objective reality that exists independently of consciousness. It's more like a mode of perception, a way in which consciousness organizes experience. The physicists tell us that at the most fundamental level of reality, there may be no such thing as time at all. The equations that describe the quantum realm don't require it. And Einstein showed us that time is relative, not absolute. It can stretch or compress depending on how fast you're moving or how strong the gravitational field is where you happen to be. But we don't need to delve into physics to recognize the relative nature of time. We experience it directly in our own lives. Time flies when we're having fun. Time drags when we're suffering. Time disappears when we're in a state of flow. What's happening in these moments? I would suggest that when we're fully engaged with what we're doing, when our attention is completely absorbed in the present moment, the sense of time passing, which is really just a mental construct, a kind of narrative we overlay on experience, simply falls away. We enter what some might call the eternal now. And curiously enough, this timeless quality of consciousness seems to be intimately connected with serenity. When we're caught up in the usual time-bound thinking, worrying about the future, ruminating about the past, constantly checking the clock to see how much time has elapsed or how much remains, we tend to feel agitated, anxious, unsettled. But when we drop into the timeless present, even for a moment, there's a quality of peace that emerges naturally. Not because we've achieved anything or arrived anywhere, but simply because we've stepped out of the stream of time-bound thinking into the ocean of present moment awareness. The Zen tradition speaks of the gateless gate, a paradoxical phrase pointing to the fact that the liberation we seek is not somewhere else in some other time. It's right here, right now, always available, if only we would stop rushing past it in our hurry to get somewhere else. What if serenity isn't something to be attained in the future, after you've done all your tasks and fulfilled all your responsibilities? What if it's available right now, in this very moment, simply by shifting your relationship to time itself? Our entire lives seem to be structured around the idea of arrival, don't they? We're always trying to get somewhere, to achieve something, to become someone. Always reaching for the next milestone, the next accomplishment, the next experience, as if life were some kind of journey with a destination, some mountain to be climbed, with a summit to be reached. But what if this whole metaphor is misleading? What if life isn't a journey at all, but a dance? Not something with a beginning, middle, and end, but an ongoing process of creative expression without any particular goal. You see, when you're dancing, you're not trying to arrive anywhere. You're not trying to get to a particular spot on the dance floor. The purpose of dancing is the dance itself, the joy of movement, the pleasure of expression, the delight of being fully embodied in the present moment. What would happen if you approached life that way? Not as a series of problems to be solved or goals to be achieved, but as an ongoing dance to be enjoyed. I'm reminded of a conversation I once had with a very successful businessman who had recently retired. He had spent his entire career climbing the corporate ladder, working 60 or 70 hours a week, sacrificing his health and his relationships in pursuit of success. And now that he had arrived, now that he had the corner office, the prestigious title, the substantial bank account, he found himself strangely empty, unsure of what to do with himself. I spent my whole life getting somewhere, he told me, and now that I'm here, I realize I don't know how to just be anywhere. How tragic, and yet how common. We're so focused on arriving that we never learn how to be present. We're so busy becoming that we never discover how to simply be. And the great cosmic joke is that there is no arrival. There is no final destination where all your problems will be solved, all your desires fulfilled, all your questions answered. Life continues to unfold moment by moment with its inevitable mixture of pleasure and pain, success and failure, clarity and confusion. The question is not whether you will arrive. You won't, because there's nowhere to arrive at. The question is whether you can embrace the dance of life as it is, with all its imperfections and uncertainties, its joys and sorrows, its mysteries and paradoxes. What happens when you stop trying to arrive, when you let go of the need to get somewhere, to accomplish something, to become someone? In my experience, something quite remarkable occurs. There's a kind of relaxation, a release of tension you may not even have realized you were carrying. And in that relaxation, in that surrender to what is rather than what you think should be, a natural serenity emerges, not as something you've achieved, but as something that was always there beneath the surface of your striving. Have you ever sat by a pond or a lake on a windy day, watching the waves ripple across the surface, distorting the reflections, stirring up the silt from the bottom so that everything becomes cloudy and unclear? And then perhaps you've returned on a still day when the wind has dropped and found that same body of water perfectly calm, mirror-like, reflecting the sky and the trees with perfect clarity, revealing the pebbles and plants beneath the surface that were previously hidden. Your mind is rather like that body of water. The thoughts, emotions, and sensations that constantly ripple through your awareness are like the waves on the surface, stirred up by the winds of desire and aversion, hope and fear, pleasure and pain. When these winds are blowing strongly, as they so often are in our busy, stress-filled lives, the mind becomes agitated, cloudy, confused. But beneath all that surface activity, there's a deeper dimension of consciousness that remains undisturbed, like the depths of the lake that remain still, even when the surface is whipped into a frenzy by the wind. This deeper awareness, some traditions call it the witness or pure consciousness, is always present, always available, though usually overlooked in our fascination with the content of our experience rather than the context in which it appears. The great mystery and the great discovery is that serenity isn't something you need to create or achieve. It's already there, within you, beneath the noise and agitation of ordinary thinking. It's your natural state, your birthright, the ground of your being. But of course, most of us don't experience life this way most of the time. We're caught up in the drama on the surface, the endless narrative of me and my life, my problems, my desires, my fears. We identify so completely with the ripples that we forget the depth from which they arise. How do we access this deeper dimension? Not by fighting with the waves, not by trying to force the mind into stillness. That's just creating more agitation. Rather by simply becoming aware of awareness itself, by shifting attention from the objects of perception, thoughts, emotions, sensations, to the perceiving itself. It's a subtle shift, and yet it changes everything. Because suddenly you're no longer identified with the content of your experience. You're no longer caught up in the drama of me and my story. You're resting in the open, spacious awareness within which all experience arises. I remember once sitting in meditation at a retreat center in Japan. It had been a difficult day. My knees were aching, my back was sore, my mind was buzzing with thoughts. I was trying so hard to find some peace, some clarity, some enlightenment experience that would make all the discomfort worthwhile. And then, quite unexpectedly, there was a shift. Not a dramatic breakthrough, not a mystical vision, but simply a relaxing of effort, a letting go of the need to get anywhere or accomplish anything. And in that letting go, I suddenly became aware of an incredible stillness and peace that had been there all along, beneath my striving and struggling. It wasn't that my thoughts disappeared or my knees stopped hurting. It was that I was no longer identified with those experiences. They were happening, yes, but they were happening within a vast open field of awareness that wasn't touched by them, just as the depths of the lake aren't disturbed by the waves on the surface. That serenity, that peace, that clarity, it's always there, waiting patiently beneath the noise and busyness of your life. Not as some exotic state to be achieved through years of spiritual practice, but as the very ground of your being, your natural state, available here and now, if only you would stop long enough to notice it. It's a curious thing, isn't it, how we've managed to transform life, this extraordinary gift, this mysterious adventure, into something that feels like a never-ending race. A race where we're constantly running, constantly striving, constantly trying to get ahead, and yet somehow never arriving anywhere worth being. How did this happen? How did we create a way of living that leaves so many of us feeling perpetually behind, perpetually inadequate, perpetually exhausted? I think it has something to do with a fundamental confusion about what life is for. Somewhere along the line, we seem to have accepted the idea that the purpose of life is production and consumption, making things and using things, earning money and spending money, accumulating experiences and achievements as if they were collectibles to be displayed on a shelf. And this confusion has been institutionalized in our economic system, our educational system, our media, our technology, all of which push us toward ever-increasing speed, efficiency, productivity, growth. Consider the smartphone in your pocket, an amazing tool to be sure, but also a device that has effectively eliminated any natural pauses in our day. Those little moments of idle waiting for a bus, in a checkout line before a meeting starts, that once might have been opportunities for daydreaming, for observation, for simply being with ourselves. They've all been filled with email checking, news scanning, social media scrolling busyness. Or consider the way work has expanded to fill every available space in our lives. With our digital devices, we can work anywhere, anytime, and increasingly we do. The boundary between work and rest, once fairly clear, has become permeable, blurred, in many cases, non-existent. Even our leisure has become a kind of work. We don't just go on vacation anymore, we curate experiences, document them meticulously on social media, turn them into content for others to consume. We don't just have hobbies, we monetize them, turn them into side hustles, personal brands. It's as if we've collectively forgotten how to simply be, without producing or consuming, without documenting or sharing, without trying to optimize or improve or achieve. And the most peculiar thing about this race we're all running is that there's no finish line. No point at which we can say, I've arrived, now I can rest. Because there's always more to do, more to have, more to be. The goalposts keep moving. The horizon keeps receding as we approach it. We think, I'll be happy when I get that promotion, that house, that relationship, that recognition. But when we get there, we find that our desires have already moved on to the next thing, the next achievement, the next acquisition. It's like trying to quench your thirst by drinking salt water. Each sip only makes you thirstier. What if we've been looking for satisfaction in all the wrong places? What if the peace and fulfillment we're seeking isn't to be found in achieving more or having more, but in wanting less? Not in adding things to our lives, but in subtracting unnecessary complications. Not in accelerating, but in slowing down. Have you ever spent time simply watching clouds drift across the sky, or observing the slow, imperceptible growth of a tree, or witnessing the patient erosion of stone by water, drop by drop, over countless years? Nature has a very different relationship with time than we do. It doesn't rush, it doesn't force, it doesn't try to compress or optimize or maximize. It simply unfolds according to its own intrinsic rhythms, at its own natural pace. A seed doesn't become a tree overnight, no matter how much you might wish it to. A caterpillar doesn't transform into a butterfly any faster because you're impatient to see its wings. The tide doesn't rise or fall according to your schedule. There's a profound wisdom in this natural pace that we've largely forgotten in our accelerated, artificially sped-up world. A wisdom that recognizes that some processes simply cannot be rushed without damaging their essential quality or integrity. I remember once hiking in the mountains with a friend who was at that time going through a difficult period in his life. He was restless, agitated, full of questions about what he should do next, which path he should take, how he could resolve the various dilemmas he was facing. As we walked, I pointed to a massive boulder beside the trail, a chunk of granite that had probably been there for thousands, perhaps millions of years. "What does that rock know about your problems?" I asked him. He looked at me as if I'd gone slightly mad. "Nothing," he said. "It's a rock." "Exactly," I replied. "And yet there's something we can learn from it. That rock has been here long before you were born, and it will remain long after you're gone. It exists in a different time scale altogether. From its perspective, your problems, which seem so urgent, so all-consuming to you, are like a momentary ripple on the surface of a vast ocean." Something shifted in his expression then. I could see him taking in the mountains around us, the ancient trees, the clouds drifting overhead, all operating according to rhythms so much slower, so much more patient than the frantic pace of his own thoughts. And in that moment I could see a kind of relief wash over him, as if a burden had been momentarily lifted. This is what nature teaches us about pace, that there's a profound strength in slowness, a deep wisdom in patience, that not everything needs to happen right now, that some things, perhaps the most important things, require time to mature, to ripen, to find their proper form. The mountain doesn't apologize for taking millions of years to form. The oak doesn't feel guilty for taking decades to reach its full height. The river doesn't worry about whether it's taking the most efficient route to the sea. There's a kind of trust there, a trust in the process of life itself, a recognition that timing has its own intelligence that often exceeds our limited understanding. What would it be like to bring some of that natural patience, that trust in timing, into your own life? To recognize that perhaps not everything needs to be solved immediately, that some questions are meant to be lived with for a while before answers emerge, that some processes need to unfold at their own pace rather than according to your schedule. This doesn't mean becoming passive or fatalistic. The river may not worry about its route, but it still flows. The tree doesn't fret about its growth, but it still reaches for the sun. There's still movement, still engagement, still participation in life. But it's a different quality of engagement, not driven by anxiety or impatience or the need to control, but flowing from a deeper alignment with the rhythms of reality itself. So here we are, you and I, in this strange predicament called modern life, surrounded by devices designed to save us time, and yet somehow feeling more rushed than ever. blessed with conveniences our ancestors could hardly have imagined, and yet often feeling more stressed, more overwhelmed, more disconnected than they were. What are we to do? Move to a mountain cabin? Throw away our smartphones? Withdraw from the madness of contemporary society? Perhaps that's right for some. But for most of us, I suspect, the answer lies not in escape, but in transformation. Not in rejecting the world, but in finding a different way of being in it. And this brings us to what may be the most essential paradox of all, finding stillness within movement, peace within activity, the eternal moment within the rushing stream of time. You see, serenity isn't something that exists only in monasteries or meditation retreats, only in perfect circumstances where all distractions and disturbances have been eliminated. That would be a fragile kind of peace indeed, dependent on conditions, easily disrupted, available only to the few who can arrange their lives in particular ways. No, the serenity we're speaking of is much more robust, much more universal. It's available right in the midst of your busy life, in the very center of the whirlwind. Not by stopping the wind, you can't, but by finding the still point at its center. How? Not by adding something to your already full life, not by giving yourself one more thing to do or achieve, but rather by recognizing what's already here, what's already true beneath all the doing and becoming. This moment, this very moment, as you listen to these words, is the only moment that ever exists. The past is a memory, the future a projection. All your experience, all your life happens now, only now, always now. And this now is inexhaustible, limitless, ever fresh. It's not a tiny sliver of time sandwiched between past and future. It's the very ground of reality, the only place where life actually happens. When you recognize this, not intellectually but directly, experientially, something quite remarkable occurs. The sense of always needing to get somewhere else, to be someone else, to have something else begins to relax. You start to see that what you've been searching for has been here all along, hidden in plain sight, obscured only by your own restless seeking. This doesn't mean you stop engaging with life, stop acting, stop caring about what happens. Quite the contrary. When you're fully present, you can respond to what's actually happening rather than to your projections and anxieties about what might happen. You can act from clarity rather than confusion, from wisdom rather than reactivity. And curiously enough, when you stop trying to control time, when you stop fighting against its passage or trying to cram more and more into each moment, you discover a different relationship with time altogether. Not chronological time, measured by clocks and calendars, but what some philosophers have called kairos, the right or opportune moment, the fullness of time. In this way of experiencing time, some moments seem to expand, to take on a depth and richness that transcends their chronological duration. Haven't you had experiences like that? Moments of beauty or connection or insight that seem somehow outside of time altogether? These aren't anomalies or hallucinations. They're glimpses of a different way of being, one that's available to all of us, not just in special moments, but as our natural state, if only we would slow down enough to notice it. So perhaps that's what it means to slow down the soul, not to withdraw from life or to move in slow motion, but to drop beneath the surface agitation of the mind into the deeper current of being that flows beneath. To find, within the rushing stream of experience, the eternal moment that is always here, always now, always complete. You know, it's rather funny when you think about it. Here we are, having spent all this time talking about slowing down, and yet words themselves are a kind of rushing. They tumble forth one after another in a linear sequence, pushing us forward through time, through concepts, through ideas. But perhaps that's appropriate, because the serenity we're speaking of isn't found by stopping the flow of life, but by diving deeply into it, not by escaping time, but by fully inhabiting it. Not by silencing the mind, but by listening to it so attentively that you begin to hear the silence that lies between and beneath the words. In the end, all these words, mine and yours, all the philosophies and teachings and practices, are just fingers pointing at the moon. They're not the moon itself. The territory of direct experience always exceeds the map of concepts and language. So I invite you, as we come to the close of our time together, to set aside everything I've said, to let go of all concepts and ideas about serenity or presence or slowing down, to simply be here now, aware of your own awareness, conscious of your own consciousness. Because ultimately, the peace you seek isn't something to be attained through effort or understanding. It's your natural state, your birthright, the very ground of your being. Not something to find, but something to remember. Not somewhere to arrive at, but somewhere you've never left. The journey of 1,000 miles ends exactly where it began, here now in the only moment there ever is. If something in these words has resonated within you, perhaps it wasn't really anything new I've told you. Perhaps it was simply a recognition of something you've always known, somewhere deep inside, beneath the noise and busyness of everyday life. That recognition is yours, not mine. I've merely been a mirror, reflecting back to you your own innate wisdom, your own capacity for presence and peace. So take what serves you and leave the rest. Share these reflections if you feel moved to do so, but remember, no one can wake up for you. No one can slow down your soul for you. That's a journey only you can take, one conscious breath, one present moment at a time. And in the end, perhaps the greatest paradox of all is that it's not really a journey at all, but a coming home to what you've always been.